Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard about a little thing called the 2024 United States presidential election. The fate of the Republic is at stake, crazy plot twists abound, the incumbent president dropping out, a controversial foreign war, and every single tweet scientifically designed by the best algorithms a billionaire can buy to utterly enrage me, single-handedly contributing to the complete degradation of my hope for this country. But anyways, if there's one thing I've learned from all these tweets, from listening to 538 Politics podcast episodes like they're sermons from the Pope of Politics himself, and from grimacing at my own mail-in ballot, it's that Americans just do not like their options very much. But what if we weren't stuck with Donald J. Trump and Kamala Harris? What if the parties were different? What if we had more of them? And I'm not just talking about the three Trotskyist parties running simultaneously this year. This is What, Why, How, and that's what the video's about. If you like this sort of thing, subscribe and promptly get your brain checked. If you have any hope at all in the future of humanity left over in your cold heart, I've got a video coming down the pipeline on how Hakeem lies about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact before World War II. Check out my Patreon to see that script, and it's coming out soon, so subscribe. Alright, but enough of that. Let's check in on how the 2024 presidential election is doing in a couple different parallel universes from alternate histories. If you get bored of one, just wait a few minutes, we'll teleport to a more interesting one. Okay, before we go gallivanting off into anything too strange, what if the American third parties were stronger? Well, really only the noteworthy third parties in the US are the Libertarian Party and the Green Party, which are basically home to a couple million left-wing and right-wing people unsatisfied by the Dems and Republicans and privileged enough to toss their vote into a garbage can.
Should someone have to have a government-issued license to drive a car?
You know, I'd like to see some competency exhibited by people before they drive.
Third parties are so small in America because of the Electoral College. Voters think strategically, and they know if they vote for a third party, they're essentially wasting a vote. Sorry, that's just the way it is. If you're angry, comment below, it'll boost the video. Anyways, most voters know this. Really, only the true way to boost America's third parties to the levels seen elsewhere in the developed world is to get rid of the Electoral College. And guess what? In 1970, the Buy-Seller Amendment would have done just that if it wasn't filibustered away by Congress. How do we change that? What could have gone differently? Well, if the divided 1968 presidential election went a little differently and Nixon lost just a few more states, no candidate would win a majority in the Electoral College. What happens next? Well, the House then gets to vote by state, and after several humiliating rounds, Nixon would just cut a deal with the Southern Democrats and win anyways. But this chaotic election gives the Buy-Seller Amendment enough fuel to cross the finish line. So in every election afterward, the American president is elected by the popular vote. If a candidate fails to get more than 40%, a second round election occurs. Kinda like France. This decreases the pressure for people to vote strategically and boosts third parties over the next few decades. Beginning in 1992, of course, the Republican Party is unable to win a popular vote, driving arch-conservatives to ditch the ticket in 2004 and forge their own American Populist Party, championed by none other than Donald J. Trump. In the runoff, John McCain wins though, but is beaten then in 2008 by Obama. With the Populists becoming a viable third party, an increasing number of anti-establishment congressmen join them. There are also more left-wing congresspeople who identify not as Democrats, but as Greens, Socialists, or Progressives. They all caucus with the Dems though, like Bernie Sanders does in real life. Anyways, in 2016 in this timeline, Hillary Clinton beats Trump, who in a shock leapfrogs over the GOP. He runs again in 2020, but fails to beat Hillary, with the Republicans clawing back to their place in the sun. So what does 2024 look like? The biggest party on the left would of course be the Democratic Party. Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona will definitely reach the second round of voting. He's challenged by the Progressives and of course the Socialists, with the latter two most popular in New England and the West Coast. Then there's the centrist Forward Party, the ultimate both sides are bad faction, which finds its supporters among Mormons and New Jerseyans. Vice President Joe Lieberman organized this party after losing the 2008 primary to Obama and has been downhill, like Lieberman, ever since then. On the right, the Republicans are led by Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia. The Populist Party has broken apart, so he's challenged instead by the Libertarians, led by the Governor-turned-Senator Gary Johnson of New Mexico, and the far-right Patriot Party, funded by Donald Trump, and led by failed Senate candidate and Unabomber appreciator Blake Masters. Despite their best efforts, these third parties will most likely lose to the Democrats and Republicans, who will face each other again in the second round election later in November. Republicans excluded from the White House for the past 30 years, except for 4 years of John McCain, see 2024 as their place to finally reclaim power. But who do you think would win? But let's look at an even weirder timeline just for fun. If you remember your middle school social studies classes, you know about the Federalist Party, the party of Hamilton, of John Adams, of a strong central government. But the Federalists shot themselves in the foot by nearly betraying the country during the 1812 war with Britain. So the Federalists crumbled to dust in the 1820s. But what if they didn't? What if the Federalist Party played their cards right? Well, if they survived America's chaotic first few decades, the Federalists would keep on kicking as America's pro-industry, big government party. While they nearly explode during the radicalism of the 1850s, they managed to rebrand and absorb the abolitionists like Abraham Lincoln, who want a strong, united country. But after the Civil War, the pro-business Federalists face increasing challenges from the populist left. In 1904, Governor Teddy Roosevelt beats the Federalists as the flag bearer of the new Progressive Party. So through the 1900s, America has 3 major parties. Let's fast forward to 2024, when you actually have 4 major parties. On the one hand are the Democrats, which have returned and shrunk to their homeland in the South and are now essentially the political arm of the Southern Baptists. They're led by Governor Mike Huckabee, but he's crafted an alliance with the Constitution Party, which rocketed to national prominence in the 1990s as a libertarian small government alternative to the 2 big government parties. Now they are the personal cult of New York businessman John D. Trump. And of course, there's the Federalist Party, led by incumbent President Andy Cuomo. Cuomo has become embroiled in his own scandals, giving fuel to the Progressive Party, which has nominated Congressman Ro Khanna of California. Who would you vote for? Before you cast your ballot, though, let's look to a different timeline. What if American politics were like Europe's? Well, in case you didn't know, the European Parliament has a bunch of major parties split apart mostly by ideology. If the Founding Fathers got together at the Constitutional Convention and created instead a sort of parliamentary republic with a prime minister instead of our system of a president, greater political power would be placed within the Congress, allowing for new political parties to blossom instead of our stagnant 2 parties. Alright, so what next? Well, over the course of American history, a couple major parties rise and fall. Let's fast forward to 2024, though, which has congressional elections. Your options are 1. The New Liberal Party, a moderate center-left party with its base in the northeast suburbs. 2. The Progressive Union, a coalition of a bunch of different progressives and socialist parties from across the United States. 3. The Conservatives, which, they're conservative. 4 is the Freedom Party, which started off as libertarian but has quickly shifted toward right-wing populism. 5 is the Democratic Party, a paleo-conservative far-right southern regionalist party. And 6 is Democracia Cristiana, which represents the Latino population in the South. Now, of course, there are a bunch of little regionalist parties like ones in Texas and Deseret. True What, Why, How fans will recognize this timeline from another video, which you should watch after this one, but some major changes have happened since the 2022 congressional elections. For one, Prime Minister Nancy Pelosi has announced she will not seek re-election. Phew. So the New Liberals have instead put forward Senator Barack Obama to be their flag bearer. Meanwhile, the Progressive Union, however, has split in half over whether to ditch their alliance with the New Liberals over Israel. The Socialists have defected away from the government coalition and nearly toppled Pelosi. So who would you vote for? Okay, but let's go to a universe my audience would probably appreciate a bit. An America which is about 200% more socialist. To make this happen, America would need pretty major pressure. Domestically, the government failing to respond to the Great Depression in the 1930s would provide enough fuel for socialists to make major moves. And, ironically, if Germany wins the Second World War, America would be negatively polarized in the opposite direction. But let's fast forward to today. The United States has mostly kept its original constitution, but has passed a whole bunch of amendments implementing the sort of economic reforms progressives and socialists supported during the Great Depression. Let's talk about America's parties from right to left. The Republican Party is still around, but through government intervention and generations of socialist advocacy, propaganda, only a small portion of the population votes for them. Then is the Democratic Party, a moderate centrist group which has shed its progressives away. The largest political party overall is the Social Democrats, who are led by retiring President Bernie Sanders. His main opposition to the left is the Socialist Workers' Party, which is Trotskyist communist. Then beyond them are a scattering of Stalinists and secessionists. While President Bernie Sanders is mostly popular, the Democrats and Trotskyists are boosted by a new generation of college students who view Sanders and the old social democratic way as stagnant. They want change. Meanwhile, Russian and German refugees from Europe who settle in North Dakota and Minnesota also turn to the Trotskyists. Who do you think would win? Okay, but let's zip to a random fun idea I had that I just had to add to this video. What if America was a lot less polarized? And what if the parties were twisted around a bit so that the Republicans held some Democratic policies and vice versa? This one's for the enlightened centrists out there. Let's rewind back to 1976. President Gerald Ford, having pardoned Nixon, hopes he can prove himself deserving of his shiny new desk in the Oval Office. He's running against Jimmy Carter, a moderate from the South. Despite an economic downturn, the fall of South Vietnam, and of course the whole Watergate sinkhole, Ford lost only narrowly, 30 electoral college votes short. But if Ford got just 5,000 more votes in Ohio, he would have won that state's 25 electoral college votes. Not so bad. Then if he won just a few thousand more votes in Hawaii, he would have gotten an extra 4 votes. That would bring him to 269, and guess what? Ford lost a faithless elector in Washington to Ronald Reagan. This election was really close. If Ford didn't make his awkward gaffes in a debate,
there is no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, and there never will be under a Ford administration.
He might have won the presidency in 1976. Alright, then what? Well, Gerald Ford, believe it or not, was a lot more moderate than Ronald Reagan. Then come in 1980, Democrats beat Vice President Bob Dole with Democratic Governor of Georgia, Jimmy Carter, another moderate. Carter luckily dodges a lot of foreign crises that ruined his presidency, so he wins another term in 1984. In 1988, Ronald Reagan is too old, to run for president. Republicans instead go with Senator George H.W. Bush of Texas, who successfully wins the presidency as a moderate. Then is the moderate Bill Clinton, a Democrat, and after him John McCain, another moderate, Republican this time, who selects the Democrat-turned-independent Joe Lieberman to be his vice president. Guess what? He's moderate too. In 2012, Democrats win with Hillary Clinton, running as a centrist moderate, who loses to Mitt Romney, another centrist moderate, in 2016. Racing toward the center in 2024, Democrats nominate Montana Governor Steve Bullock, a moderate, while Republicans nominate Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker, a moderate, who leapfrogs over President Romney's disagreeable vice president, Chris Christie, PU. Now, the Democrats are still a bit more liberal overall than the Republicans, but they also hold some conservative positions. For example, Dems oppose free trade and support expanding oil drilling in some areas. Republicans, meanwhile, hold some liberal positions. Baker, following in President Romney's footsteps, supports expanding healthcare coverage and funding renewable energies like wind and solar. According to opinion polling, this will be the result, with Baker winning the swing states in the West and Northeast, so New Hampshire, Maine, you get the idea. Meanwhile, Bullock wins the swing states in the Midwest and the South, so Montana, his home state, Georgia, Florida, that sort of thing. Since neither party has sprinted away from the other, Democrats still have a conservative southern branch, and Republicans have a northern liberal branch, which would vote for the other team if they weren't loyal to their party. You can see that on the map. But who would you vote for? Anyways. Okay, I just talked a whole bunch. What's the lesson at the end of all this? Well, first of all, nothing is inevitable. If you don't like how America looks, and of course you live in America, then get involved with politics anyways. You can volunteer, it's not so hard. You can phone bank, join groups. The Democrats and the Republicans aren't inevitable. If you don't like them, you can join a different group. And of course, vote. Even if nobody's perfect, just vote anyways. That's all I have for you today, though. If you want to see that Hakeem debunk, which is pretty good if I do say so myself, you can do so on patreon.com/whatwhyhow. Thanks to those who already support me. User SEQ, Marklin, Sheba, Caliber, Lehan Whale, Goblin, Lily, 7zip, Sean, Lars, Venterchromia, Jared, Quincy, Dionysio, Benjamin, Basit, Mimo, Lord Dan, Sam Abdreher, Channel 101, Freddie, Party, South Africa, Help Africa, Aaron, Pankshead, Gentle, Trudeau, Kenshi, Brant, Sammy, Nephron, Abag, Jude, Austin, Jackson, and Joao. Thanks, and adios.